All right, today we're tackling two of the absolute cornerstones of literature, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Now, these are names we've all heard, right? But they tell two totally different stories about what it even means to be a hero. So let's dig in and figure out what that difference really is. So let's get right to it. You've got the Iliad and you've got the Odyssey. They're both these massive epic poems, they're both set around the Trojan War, and they're both from this legendary poet Homer. And yet, they could not be more different in what they have to say about heroism. Okay, so the first thing you've got to know is that both of these poems, which were probably put together around the 8th century BCE, are pulling from the same massive legend, the Trojan War. But here's the thing, neither one tells the whole story. Think of them more like giant, powerful spotlights, each one zeroing in on a very different, very specific part of that legend.
So let's start with the first one, the Iliad. Now, a lot of people think the Iliad is the story of the entire 10-year Trojan War. And if you think that, hey, you're not alone. But it's actually way more focused. It's this raw, brutal, and deeply tragic story that's all driven by one single overwhelming emotion.
Yep, at its core, the Iliad is all about wrath. The entire epic, which, by the way, only covers a few weeks in the final year of the war, is fueled by the rage of one man, the hero Achilles. His anger is literally the engine that drives the whole plot forward.
And listen, we are not just talking about being angry here. The Greek word for this is menace. This isn't just being mad or frustrated. This is a cosmic, almost superhuman rage. It's the kind of anger that doesn't just hurt people. It's so powerful it changes the entire course of a war and even gets the gods involved. It's a world-breaking kind of anger.
And you can see how this rage shapes the whole story. First, Achilles' pride is wounded by his commander, so he storms off and refuses to fight. Then, that selfish anger turns into grief-fueled vengeance when his best friend is killed. But finally, in this incredible quiet moment at the end, his rage finally cools and he sees the humanity in his greatest enemy. The entire poem is a journey through this one emotion.
So, this brings us to our hero, Achilles. He is, without a doubt, the greatest warrior of his generation, a fighter who is practically invincible on the battlefield. But what really, truly drives him isn't just winning. He's chasing something bigger, something that lasts.
And that something has a name, Kleos. It means glory or fame. See, in their world, the idea of an afterlife wasn't really a thing. So Kleos was a kind of immortality. The belief was that if you did incredible deeds, your story would be told forever. Your name would never die. And for a warrior like Achilles, that was worth dying for.
Okay, now let's pivot. If the Iliad is all about the blazing fury of war, the Odyssey is about the long, exhausting, and treacherous journey that comes after. It's the story about what happens when the fighting is over, and you just want to find your way back.
And just like the Iliad had one single focus, so does the Odyssey. But instead of wrath, the driving force here is homecoming. It's about one man's relentless, decade-long struggle to get back to his family, his home, and maybe even back to himself.
The Greek word for this is nostos. You might hear our word nostalgia in there, and that's exactly where it comes from. But nostos is so much more than just being homesick. It's a heroic quest all on its own, a journey packed with suffering that tests a hero to their absolute limits to see if they're even worthy of returning home.
And man, what a journey it is. Odysseus' trip home is basically a greatest hits album of Greek mythology. He blinds a cyclops, outsmarts a witch who turns men into pigs, literally travels to the underworld, sails past the deadly sirens. Every single stop is a new, insane test, not just of his strength, but of his wits and his will to survive.
Which brings us to our very different hero, Odysseus. Now, he's a veteran of the Trojan War, same as Achilles, but that's where the similarities end. Odysseus is not the strongest guy on the battlefield. He's the smartest. He doesn't win with brute force, he wins with his mind. His defining trait is something the Greeks called metis, a kind of cunning intelligence. It's the ability to think on your feet, to use trickery and disguises to come up with clever plans to get out of impossible situations. You know, where Achilles would charge in with a spear, Odysseus shows up with a plan. That's his superpower.
So let's put it all together. We have our two heroes, our two epics. One is the ultimate warrior, absolutely consumed by rage and glory. The other is a clever wanderer, just trying to get home. Let's put them head to head.
I mean, look at this. The two heroes are almost perfect opposites. You've got Achilles the warrior, defined by his incredible strength, fighting for that immoral glory, Kleos. And then you have Odysseus, the strategist, defined by his intelligence, fighting just to get home, Nostos. They are two completely different models for what a hero can be.
And the poems themselves reflect this. The Iliad is tragic, it's intense, it's focused on just a few weeks of war, and it ends on a pretty downbeat note. The Odyssey? It's a sprawling adventure that takes place over 10 years, and it ends with everything put back in its right place. Here's the bottom line. One is a war story, the other is a post-war story.
So, if the Iliad isn't the whole war, and the Odyssey happens after the war, where exactly do they fit into the bigger picture? Okay, let's zoom out for a second.
As you can see, the Iliad is just one tiny but super important slice from the very end of the war. And get this, the most famous part of the war, the Trojan horse, it's not even in the Iliad. That story comes from other myths. Then, after the city falls, the Odyssey kicks in, telling the story of the long decade after. It just goes to show you, Homer was way more interested in character than in just telling a straight timeline.
So, the big question. These stories are nearly 3,000 years old. Why do we still read them? Why do we keep coming back to them? What makes them so much more than just old myths?
It's because they give us two fundamental, timeless sides of what it means to be human. The Iliad gives us the warrior's code. It's this tragic look at glory, honor, and the devastating price of rage. The Odyssey, on the other hand, gives us the survivor's code. It's a story that celebrates endurance, cleverness, and the deep, powerful idea of home. Together, they create this complete picture of heroism that has shaped basically every story that's come after them.
And really, that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The Iliad is a story that asks, what is worth dying for? And its answer is glory. The Odyssey asks a different question. What is worth living for? And its answer is home. So the question for us today is, which of those questions do we think is more important? And what does our answer say about who we consider a hero?